I talked to her 3 kids. I do believe that what she claims to have seen and her 3 kids that she actually saw. I interviewed her originally in March of '86. I went back in
Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments.
It's great to chat with former friends and new friends. It's also great to look by a clock. We've got to get the program started. You can't hear. Thank you. Good morning. Is that better? Audio check. Excellent. Mike? One measures a circle beginning anywhere, wrote Charles Fort, the iconoclast in whose memory and in recognition the International Fortean Organization presents the Mother's Day edition 2000 of Fortnight, its biennial conference devoted to the iconoclastic and the paranormal. On behalf of the Info Mother, Phyllis Benjamin, who is now an avowed, dedicated, announced non-smoker, now on record. You can't go back, Phyllis. 100 people, no. And her dedicated staff, it is our joyful assignment to welcome many of you back to Info into the spring version of its biannual conference. Phyllis says the Spring Fest is an excuse to get together and to have a good time. A little bit less formal than the Fall Fort Fest, so we hope that this is both a good time and an informative time for all of us today. I'm sure that it will be. How many of you are first-timers to either Fort Fest or Fortnight? Several. Wow, several hands. Excellent. Well, a especially fond and warm welcome to all of you. And a welcome to the vibrator room. If you haven't noticed yet, sometime during this day, this room's going to vibrate. And it's not due to poltergeist phenomenon, it's not due to a 3.2 Richter quake, although I suppose it could be, but we're not being predictive in this. It's just some equipment that's underneath the floor, so it's a way to get a little extra kick in the middle of the afternoon or late in the morning when things are going so way. This year's program draws another large circle of fine speakers together. Charles Fort espoused a philosophy of continuity in which everything is in an indeterminate state between extremisms. It's also the study and evaluation of natural, and in our viewpoint at least, some extraordinary phenomena and concepts that are seemingly inexplicable and often ignored by mainstream science today. We came across a quotation last week in the newspaper Cryptogram which captured our interest and piqued our curiosity and actually perplexed us a bit. It was a statement issued by Albert Hubbard, and it goes like this, quote, "Little minds are interested in the extraordinary, great minds in the commonplace." We don't know who Mr. Hubbard is, but he sounds like a card-carrying member of Sonic Pop to us. Maybe the quote is taken out of context. But where great minds and normal minds can indeed deal with the commonplace, it seems to us at least that the most extraordinary things attract the attention of the greatest of minds. If Hubbard's right, we and everyone in this room are little minds. We think otherwise. It's a search for the extraordinary that unveils, reveals, things that challenge our mindsets, our reality constructs, and indeed provides the impetus for learning new things about this amazing universe that Charles Fort so cogently and humorously described in his wonderful 4 books. If newcomers haven't read these, please look for them in used bookstores. I think they're still in print. Or go over to the Info bookstore next door and look for the 1-volume collected works of Charles Fort. An amazing read. 1999, Fortean phenomena continues to unfold. Did you hear about the episode involving Kate Duckworth out in Sausalito, California, when she came home from work in the afternoon to discover some 50 small anchovies scattered around her yard and on the roof of her home? Charles Fort wrote about things called fish balls. The ubiquitous physicist was called in to comment on this sudden materialization of anchovies out of place and offered the ubiquitous explanation, which in unison now would be whirlwinds. Highly selective whirlwinds, of course, never picking up anything but small anchovies in this case. Just recently in the newspaper in Harrisburg, we got this big article called, well, it was about the Big Bang. New revelations in astrophysics. Big Bang, that's how the universe is created. A little thought of omnipresent ubiquitous matter explodes back thousands of billions of years ago to create the reality that we think we all live within. Now astrophysicists have come to the side and reveal that the universe, if it started with the Big Bang, did so in a very curious fashion and went laterally. The universe is flat. Gee, this upsets everything we knew about the universe last year, says one of the astrophysicists now announcing this new discovery. Surprise, surprise. Galileo will probably be smiling in his grave as we Charles Fort. One last example of a Fortean type of phenomenon, also from our home state of Pennsylvania. March of this year, just a couple of weeks ago, 62-year-old woman, Darlene Jones, was out shopping in a grocery store. Certainly nothing Fortean about that. Another shopper walked by and she thought slapped her on her neck. Passerby wandered on down the grocery aisle. She continued her shopping and then walked home from the Acme supermarket with her package of Oreo cookies and a newspaper in hand. Not until she got home did her daughter realize that sticking out of the neck of Darlene was a 4.5-inch kitchen knife. She was taken to the hospital, listed in fair condition, the next day. Security at the supermarket went back and looked at the video surveillance tape and noticed 5 or 6 people walking right past this woman after she'd been stabbed in the neck, all of them oblivious to this woman's amazing predicament. That doesn't spend 40. You know? How can you be stabbed in the neck with a 4.5-inch kitchen knife and not be aware of it? Things like that amuse Charles Fort and amuse us. The Info Conference is the longest running annual conference in America devoted to exploring anomalous phenomena. It is, on this Mother's Day weekend, the mother of all Fortean gatherings in the United States. Over the years, Phyllis Benjamin and her staff and other leaders in Info have brought together really an amazing assemblage of world-class researchers and thousands of open-minded people such as yourselves to explore what science so often turns a close eye toward. And we're going to do that beginning right now in the 2000 edition of Fort to Light. Our first speaker this morning is Don Keating. Don comes to us this morning from Newcomerstown, Ohio, where for 16 plus years he has been investigating evidence for anomalous cryptozoological creatures roaming the backwoods of his state of Ohio. He's created a central database for all known sightings that have occurred in the state of Ohio and indeed in the Midwest, including Pennsylvania, Indiana. He formed the Tri-State Bigfoot Study Group in 1990 and 1985 and has been holding regular monthly meetings ever since to discuss the evidence for cryptozoological hominids in the heartland of the United States. A spin-off of that group is the now very popular annual Bigfoot conference, Bigfoot Expo, which was held just a couple of weeks ago. The conference for next year is going to be held on April 7th of the year 2000. And there's already talk afoot, pardon the expression, of groups from Info bussing out to attend that conference. I think after you hear his presentation today, you might want to get involved in that caravan. It is the largest North American Bigfoot conference to date that he sponsors. He also publishes a newsletter called the Monthly Bigfoot Report, which characterizes, enumerates, and discusses evidence of these creatures in Ohio and North America throughout, but also in foreign lands. It's our pleasure to introduce to you, and would you please welcome to the lectern for the first presentation of 4 by 2000, Don Keating, speaking on the case for Bigfoot in Ohio.
Thank you very much.
this is the first time in your organization, and I appreciate Phyllis extending the invitation to me to come over and speak. What I'm going to do this afternoon, or actually this morning, is show you a series of slides, as well as tell you about some of the more interesting experiences that I've had and encounters that have been turned into me from residents of the state of Ohio. My intent is to not convince you that Bigfoot exists not only in Ohio, but North America or anywhere on the face of the earth, but to show you that the woodlands of Ohio are large enough, dense enough, heavily forested to allow a creature that's anywhere from 7 to 10 foot tall to exist in Ohio. I had someone tell me last night that they thought Ohio was basically all farmlands and cities, and that is a large misconception from the people in the Pacific Northwest. But I could also see how it is a misconception from anyone who has never traveled throughout the Buckeye State. And Ohio has just over 10 million people, but yet has 41,000 square miles of territory. And if you were to draw a line from Cleveland to Columbus down to Portsmouth, anywhere east of that line, the further east that you go, the heavier the forest gets, the more rolling hills you get into. When you're in the extreme eastern part of the state, obviously neighboring West Virginia and Pennsylvania, you're getting into the foothills of the Alleghenies and the Appalachians. So the terrain is suitable, the habitat is there. Any wild animal needs three things to exist in the forest. That's food, water, and shelter. There is plenty of that in the state of Ohio. I've been investigating the Sasquatch phenomenon since July of 1984, when I picked up John Green's big book, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us. I called Mr. Green up, talked with him for about an hour in reference to what he had encountered as far as talking to eyewitnesses and looking at various tracks in the ground. And after my conversation with him, I thought the topic was interesting, but I didn't think anything like that existed in Ohio. That was in July of '84. Lo and behold, in late August of '84, the local newspaper, the New Cumberstown News, ran an article on the front page, which was titled "Strange Creature Sightings in the Area." One of the creatures was a large cat, which was probably like a cougar. Another of the creatures was a large bird, like a large parrot. And the third creature was a 7 to 8 foot tall, dark brown colored creature, walking upright on two legs, just near the New Cumberstown power plant on the other side of the Tuscarawas River. And with the idea of Sasquatch fresh in my mind after reading John Green's book just over a month beforehand, I thought I would contact the reporters at the New Cumberstown News and see if I could find out who the three teenage boys were that had claimed to have seen this creature in April of 1984. I talked to all three of them individually and as a group, and after my interview with them, I was somewhat convinced that they had probably seen what they claimed to have seen: a 7 to 8 foot tall, dark brown creature pulling leaves off of a tree and eating them. In late 1984, John Green contacted a fellow in Reynoldsburg, Ohio by the name of Tom Archer. Tom later contacted me, and as a result of that, as the old saying goes, one thing led to another. We began holding monthly meetings. We weren't going to hold a monthly meeting per se. We were going to hold a one-time meeting in July of 1985. We wanted to get as many people together from the local area and see if they knew of any recent sightings in the area. Sightings, track discoveries, sounds, anything of that sort. And lo and behold, we had 32 people assemble at the local school where I held that meeting. And it received a large amount of publicity. In fact, the AP Newswire picked up on it. And as a result of that, various researchers from across North America then started contacting me about the research that I was doing. Since then, we've held well over 100 meetings. The Tri-State Bigfoot Study Group is on a temporary hiatus. I've decided to take the rest of the year 2000 off. Every now and then you have to take a little break away from things that you're doing on a very regular basis. And so we won't assemble until April 7th of the year 2001 for the 13th annual Bigfoot conference. But we've had a lot of notorious speakers at the regular meetings. We've had Robert W. Morgan from Alliance, Ohio, John Green from British Columbia, John Benernagel from Courtney, British Columbia, who is a wildlife biologist. I think the annual Bigfoot conference has really taken off and has become an entity in its own. This year, April 8th, we had the highest number of people ever attend the annual conference. We had 225 people show up. The most impressive thing about that was we had people from as far away as Idaho drive from Idaho to go to Ohio to go to this conference. And I'm, since 1985, I'm just sitting back and saying, yeah, that's pretty amazing that somebody would take the time and the effort and everything to drive from Idaho to come down. But it's become a very popular thing, and I hope to see many of you there next year. I don't even have the first speaker lined up yet, but I will get on to it sometime this year. Anyway, to the existence of Sasquatch in Ohio. The Delaware Indians, in the written history of the Delaware Indians, in the 1700s, there is a passage in the written history that says, quote unquote, and they had to leave food out for the wild ones of the woods to keep peace with them. Now back in the 1700s, there were all kinds of black bear, buffalo, large cats like cougar, panther, a lot of wild animals. Most of them are there now, as compared to what were there in the 1700s. But I surely don't think that you would leave wild animals out for the wild animals, like the bear, the large cats, to keep peace with them, because they're going to stay on their own, leave the Indians alone, and vice versa. So the question arises is, what were the Delaware Indians talking about back in the 1700s that you had to leave food out for the wild ones in the woods? That's the first possible indication that something like that existed in the state of Ohio. After that, we have probably less than a half dozen reported sightings of what they call the wild man of Ohio. There were a couple of sightings in southern Ohio near Portsmouth. There was a sighting in southern Ohio near a community which is no longer in existence by the name of Rome, Ohio. That was in southern Ohio. And then there were also a couple of sightings near Cambridge, Ohio, which is in Guernsey County, no more than 25 miles from where I live. These are back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, your interpretation of a wild man could vary considerably. It could be anywhere from an old man living in the caves or in the outskirts of town to a large wild man covered with hair. And a lot of the reports did indeed mention the fact that the wild man that was inhabiting the local woods was covered with hair. In fact, one of the reports from down around Cambridge, Ohio, mentioned the wild man went from tree to tree. Instead of walking on the ground, it literally jumped from tree to tree, so possibly some type of a smaller primate there. All the research that I've done in Ohio, I've investigated over 100 alleged sightings in the state. I've talked to over, obviously, 100 alleged eyewitnesses. If I hadn't had my own unusual encounters, seeing the thing on two different occasions in 1985 and 1987, I would still think that the possibility of the existence of Sasquatch in Ohio was there, but I would not say that it was probable. I would lean a little more than 50% that it could exist, but I wouldn't say that it was probable. However, when you see something with your own eyes, it is very difficult, in fact virtually impossible, to say, no, it doesn't exist, I was hallucinating, what I saw wasn't there. You can't do it. When you see something like that, you've got to say, well, these 200 plus people, maybe they weren't so crazy. Maybe they did see what they said they saw. But I've talked to a lot of people. I've seen a lot of alleged physical evidence in the ground, being footprints. I've seen tracks as recently as last Sunday, 6 days ago, that I was called on a track discovery down in Coshocton County, Ohio, which was about 30 miles west of where I live. This lady calls me up around 1:30 in the afternoon, says to me, she says, this is so-and-so from Coshocton County. I said, yeah, because I never was. Are you the Bigfoot investigator? And I said, yeah. She said, well, my husband was out putting up a fence for the horses, and he ran across a footprint close to where the fence is at, and then he went down toward the creek to look around for more footprints, and he found another one down there. And you can see toes on them real well, and well, we'd like to know if he'd be willing to come out and take a look at them. I said, are the toes really visible? And she said, oh yeah, they're very visible. I said, all right, I'll go take a look. Because more often than not, when you receive a report of tracks in the ground, basically what you have is an indescript hole in the ground that has no toe formation, very little in the way of a ball or a heel formation, and you've wasted your time going to a spot where somebody dug a rock out of the ground. I don't really like to do that. So I like to ask them, I say, where are the toes? You know, and believe it or not, people's misinterpretation on toes is, I would think they would know what a toe looked like, but. So anyway, I went out there and I looked at this footprint, and I listened to the story on the phone. Then I drove the 30 miles with an associate, Richard Myers, at Newcomers Town. He goes into the woods quite often with me to help me out with research. Talked to the wife, talked to the husband. They told me about their dogs acting crazy the night before, which was a week ago tonight. Said the dogs would run just inside the wood line like they were chasing something. They would stop and head back toward the house scared. They did this on 2 or 3 separate occasions. All right, sounds interesting. Maybe they were after a bear or a cat. Maybe coyotes were chasing them, whatever. But then the husband went into the woods around 10 a.m. Sunday morning to continue work on the fence. Now what they have is they have like 3 thin electrical wires. If you understand what I'm saying. I don't live on a farm, I live in town, but these are wires that you spread across. You have a bolt through them and it keeps the animals inside the perimeter. And what he had was the bottom 2 electrical wires were pushed down to the ground underneath an old fallen tree. Now the top of this tree had been cut off years ago, and all you had was basically the tree trunk, the trunk that was laying there on the ground, tree trunk and the main part of the tree, minus the top. And what happened was these 2 lower pieces of fencing were pushed down to the ground and then wedged underneath this tree, which was interesting in itself. But a few feet away from where that happened, on the other side of the fence, was this footprint in this sandy dirt type soil. And it measured out to be 15 inches in length. And he said after he had looked at that, he decided to look around some more down toward the creek to see if there was any other signs of anything being in the area. And on this small sandbar, he found another footprint. There's a real long explanation I could get into, which I won't now, I'm on limited time, but if you look at footprints in the ground, certain tracks, you look at the ground, you look at the ground conditions, how the ground is made up. After so many years, so many tracks looking at them in the ground, you can determine whether or not a track has been dug out by hand or some type of a non-animate object like a spoon or a knife. Or you can tell whether or not that an individual has actually stepped on a certain part of territory and left an imprint there. And in my opinion, the track that was near the fence has a high probability of being authentic. And the reason I say that is because of several pieces of ground debris that were lying on the ground at the time when the individual walked through. This ground debris, a mirror reflection image was made in the ground. In other words, if you have a little stick lying in the sand, just lying there, and someone walks across the sand and that stick makes an imprint into the ground, well, it wasn't someone who dug out the imprint in the sand. It was something that walked there to leave an imprint. And it pushes that stick down into the ground and makes an indent, and the stick comes back to its natural state. So I think the track near the fence line was probably authentic. The one down toward the sandbar, I'm still, jury's still out on that in my mind. But I'm leaning towards it being authentic as well. So that was just a week ago tomorrow, Sunday. So there is activity continuing in the state of Ohio. Now what I want to do is show you a series of slides. Instead of running my mouth, I think it'd be better for you to take a look at some pictures. Show you a series of slides. I've got several things on here that show you what the terrain and the territory is like in the eastern part of Ohio. And these are all snowstorms that I photographed in Ohio. Okay. This first one here is the section of Ohio that I live in. You have Coshocton, Tuscarawas, and Guernsey counties. This is located in east central Ohio. I've highlighted those three counties in the yellow highlighter. New Comerstown is situated right here. A little historical note for those of you who don't know. Woody Hayes, the famous temperamental Ohio State football coach, was from New Comerstown, as well as Cy Young, the famous baseball pitcher. But these are the main areas that I do research in. This is Salt Fork State Park. As you drive, this is about 20 miles south-southeast of where I live. And as the crow flies, you can see it's a very short distance. It's probably 12 to 15 miles. This is just an aerial view of the community. It's small. New Comerstown itself has about 4,000 people in it. I'm not quite sure who is who. Obviously, the one with less hair is me. The 9-foot tall model is made by a friend of mine who lives in a community called Bladensburg, Ohio. This is in Knox County. He makes life-size models of Sasquatch and dinosaurs as a living. He has many more dinosaurs than what he does Bigfoot. He makes a living doing this. His dinosaur models have traveled all across North America. He's very good at what he does. And some of my material, plaster casts, are in his exhibit whenever he takes the Bigfoot exhibit itself to different parts of the United States. This gives you an idea. I'm 5'9", give or take, and this is a 9-foot tall, 3-foot across the shoulder model. And that gives you an idea of what people may be seeing in the woods when they say they spotted a 9-foot tall creature. But when you hear that, then you have to get into a little psychological analysis there. Were you drinking? How much grass were you smoking? Were you excited when you saw it? Did it come out of the woods, cross the road? Was it unexpected? Had you been watching it for 2 or 3 minutes? Several things go into it. How far was it from you? In other words, many more times what a witness says that they saw, as far as height or the breadth of the shoulders or whatever, they may not have seen, because 9 foot tall and 3 foot across the shoulders is a lot bigger than what you visualize. This is from one of my more favorite cases in the state of Ohio. This is an eyewitness watercolor painting. She actually did this herself and gave it to me when I went to interview her in March of 1986. This is in an area known as Sharon, Ohio, which is in Noble County, 40 miles south of New Comerstown. The story behind this in a capsule goes like this. She and her 3 young kids went down to the Sharon Grange Hall, which is approximately 200 yards to the south of where they live. And they have all kinds of merry-go-rounds, swings, slides, and all that the kids want to play on. So they went down there, the mother was watching over them. After a period of time, they heard something inside the woodline that they thought was one of the neighbors' cows possibly had gotten loose. So the mother, Lorena, she didn't pay any attention to it. Didn't say anything to the kids or anything of that sort. A few minutes later, this cow walks up to the fence line, and she spotted it first. The only problem was it wasn't a cow. It was this thing here. Now the facial expression with the grin, she didn't exaggerate on that. She said that it actually had a grin on its face. And it was actually standing here with its hand on a branch. This branch is about 8 foot high. I've seen it. What this thing was doing before the 3 kids actually noticed it was standing there at the wood line with its hand up on this branch, watching her kids as they were playing on the playground equipment. And she said that it actually looked like that the creature was entertained by watching the children. So that's, as she watched this thing, and she was about 30 feet away from it, in the rib cage area, the hair was thin enough that she could see just a little bit of the skin underneath the hair. And as she stood there, she told me that she was actually able to see the chest expand and retract as it stood there breathing. It was a very interesting case. She contacted me after she saw an article in the Daily Jeffersonian, Cambridge, Ohio newspaper, and I believe her. I talked to her 3 kids. I do believe that what she claims to have seen and her 3 kids that she actually saw. I interviewed her originally in March of '86. I went back in, I believe it was February of 1991 with another researcher. We talked to her again, and her story was the same as it was 5 years previous. This aerial photo here shows you the Newcomerstown substation right here. 15 years ago, this wasn't dug out. They've did this to put houses and stuff in here. This storage tank wasn't here, but the reason this photo...
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.